Comfort is warm, it's familiar, it feels safe. It's that place in life where things are predictable, where routines are stable, and where challenges are minimal. It's the life most people wish for because it appears peaceful on the outside. You wake up, go to work, come home, relax, repeat. There's no threat, no risk, and very little discomfort. But here's the truth. Comfort doesn't teach you anything. It rarely pushes you to grow. It never forces you to look deeper, to question yourself, to sharpen your skills, or to develop your character. Comfort may offer temporary peace, but it comes at the cost of long-term progress. Failure, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It stings. It breaks your rhythm. It shakes your ego and exposes your blind spots. But that's exactly why it teaches you. Because in the moment of failure, something happens. Your assumptions get challenged. Your confidence gets tested. Your systems are exposed. You are forced to confront the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And in that confrontation, learning begins. When you fail, you start asking questions. What went wrong? Why didn't it work? What could I have done better? These questions don't come from comfort. They come from disruption. And every time you ask those questions honestly, you get answers that can change your life. Maybe it's a flaw in your approach. Maybe it's a lack of discipline. Maybe it's an emotional reaction that got in the way, or maybe it's just a lesson in patience. Whatever the case, the lesson is only visible because the failure revealed it. Now think about a time when things were easy. You didn't think twice. You weren't questioning. You weren't growing. That's not because you were wrong. It's because you weren't being challenged. You were in a comfort zone. And comfort zones are deceptive. They feel good in the moment, but cost you your potential in the long run. They lull you into thinking you're doing fine, even when deep down you know you're capable of more. But because nothing is going wrong, you stop reaching, you stop risking, you stop growing. Failure changes that. It breaks the illusion. It wakes you up. It reminds you that effort alone isn't enough, that skill matters, that focus matters, that execution matters. It reminds you that wanting something doesn't guarantee getting it. And it gives you a reason to improve. That's why failure, as painful as it is a better teacher than comfort could ever be. Comfort tells you to stay the same. Failure tells you where you need to change. Comfort whispers lies like, you're fine just the way you are. Failure shouts the truth. You're not there yet, but here's what to fix. And for those who are serious about becoming more, that truth is powerful. Because you can't solve a problem you won't admit. You can't grow if you don't see where growth is needed. And you can't become your best self if all you ever chase is ease and safety. The most valuable lessons in life almost always come with discomfort. Whether it's in business, relationships, fitness, or personal development, the breakthrough often comes after the breakdown. It comes when you fall short, not when you succeed. It comes when things don't go as planned and you have to pause, reflect, regroup, and come back stronger. And if you embrace that process, every failure becomes a stepping stone. Every misstep becomes a lesson. Every shortcoming becomes a message that something needs your attention. That's why failure teaches, because it grabs you by the collar and says, look here, this is what you missed. This is what you must improve. Comfort never says that. Comfort lets you cruise through life without asking the hard questions. It makes you passive. It makes you lazy. It makes you okay with average. And while there's nothing wrong with peace, there is something wrong with settling too soon. Failure is often misunderstood. Most people see it as the end, as a signal that they weren't good enough, smart enough, talented enough, or lucky enough. They treat it like a wall they've run into, not realizing it's actually a signpost trying to point them in the right direction. Failure is not defeat unless you decide to stop. It's feedback. Pure, honest, and unfiltered. It's life's way of showing you what doesn't work so you can get closer to what does. When a plan fails, when an idea doesn't produce results, when your effort doesn't lead to success, it's not a reason to quit. It's a reason to listen. What did the failure tell you? What did it expose? What assumptions were wrong? What skills were missing? This is the power of feedback. It provides clarity. It doesn't always feel good, but it gives you what success never can: awareness. Success can hide flaws, but failure reveals them. Success can mask weak spots, but failure highlights them in bright red. People who succeed at the highest level know how to translate failure into instruction. They don't ask, "Why did I lose?" with frustration. They ask, "What can I learn?" with curiosity. They don't walk away from a loss with shame. They walk away with data, because that's what failure really is. Data. It's input. It's the result of variables that you now get to analyze. And if you're willing to study it, if you're humble enough to accept it, failure becomes one of your greatest assets. Let's say you start a business and it doesn't work. That's not defeat. That's feedback. Maybe the product wasn't right. Maybe the market wasn't ready. Maybe your marketing didn't connect. These are things you can now fix. But you can only fix what you're willing to face. The same goes for relationships. If something ends, it's not just heartbreak. It's feedback. Maybe communication was weak. Maybe expectations weren't clear. Maybe values didn't align. That's not the end. That's valuable insight for the next chapter. When people avoid failure, what they're really avoiding is the discomfort of facing the truth. Because feedback, when honest, is not always flattering. It may tell you that you didn't try hard enough. It may tell you that you weren't as prepared as you thought. It may tell you that your mindset wasn't ready. But even if the truth hurts, it helps. Even if the truth is uncomfortable, it's what sets you free. You can't grow with false praise. You grow when you hear what's real. The most dangerous thing isn't failing. The most dangerous thing is succeeding without knowing why. Because when you succeed without understanding the process, you think everything you're doing is right until it isn't. Then the fall is even harder. But if you've failed and paid attention, you develop pattern recognition. You start to see what works and what doesn't. You refine your approach. You sharpen your judgment. You begin to move with wisdom, not just ambition. There's also something deeply humbling about failure. It reminds you that you don't have it all figured out yet. It takes your ego out of the driver's seat and puts growth in control. And that's important, because ego wants to look good, but growth wants to be good. Feedback is for those who care more about getting better than just being right. If you're willing to treat failure as a mentor, as a mirror, as a guide, you'll find yourself evolving faster than anyone else around you. Failure never shows up to destroy you. It shows up to instruct you. The only people who get destroyed by failure are those who refuse to learn from it. They take it personally instead of professionally. They let it affect their identity instead of using it to improve their strategy. But if you can remove the emotion and observe the message, every single failure becomes a form of education, specific to you, your path, your dream, and your future. People often look at someone successful and assume it was a straight path. They imagine a smooth climb, free of setbacks, doubt, or loss. But that's the illusion. What you don't see are the sleepless nights, the silent battles, the rejected ideas, the missed opportunities, and the moments of frustration that built the foundation under that success. Success doesn't come from getting everything right the first time. It comes from getting many things wrong and refusing to quit. It's not a result of perfection. It's the outcome of persistence. Behind every achievement is a story of trial and error. For every book that became a bestseller, there were drafts that were rewritten and rewritten again. For every product that changed an industry, there were prototypes that failed to work. For every powerful speech, there were moments of stumbling over words in private. The path to excellence is not straight. It's messy, uncertain, and filled with moments where most people would give up. But those who succeed don't treat failure as final. They treat it as part of the building process. Each failure adds a layer. It adds resilience, it adds understanding, it adds character. Success is never the result of one big win. It's a series of small wins stacked on top of a series of losses, with lessons carved into every one of them. Every time you fall and get back up, you're reinforcing your foundation. You're developing a kind of strength that can't be faked. You're not just chasing the result anymore. You're becoming the person who deserves the result. This is what separates those who succeed from those who only dream. It's not that successful people never failed. It's that they learned how to fail forward. They failed with focus. They kept moving. They kept improving. They understood that failure wasn't a detour. It was part of the route. And the more they failed, the more they learned what not to do, which eventually led them to what works. If you look closely at any great accomplishment, you'll find behind it a graveyard of abandoned ideas, broken plans, and missed shots. But all of them mattered. Every misstep gave clarity. Every obstacle built mental toughness. Every doubt forced deeper commitment. That's the price. That's the process. No one climbs a mountain without slipping. No one builds something meaningful without setbacks. It's not just about how many times you tried, but how many times you tried again after failing. There's a difference between a mistake and failure. A mistake is an event. Failure is when you stop trying, and the road to success is covered in mistakes. Misjudged timing, poor communication, wrong partnerships. But every one of those adds to the blueprint of success. Every mistake gives you a sharper edge. Every setback tunes your thinking. You begin to move not with blind optimism, but with calculated wisdom. Some people want the rewards, but not the bruises. They want the applause, but not the process. But it's the process that makes the success worth it. It's the struggle that gives the win its meaning. If you got it all without effort, without failing, it wouldn't carry the same weight. What makes success powerful is not just what you gain, but who you become through everything you had to endure to reach it. And this is why failure is not just part of the journey. It is the journey. It shapes you in ways that comfort never will. It teaches you lessons that success never could on its own. You become more than just a winner. You become a person who earned it through experience, through scars, through unwavering commitment. You become the kind of person who doesn't fear failure because you've seen what it builds when used properly. You no longer see setbacks as the opposite of success, but as the raw material it's made from. Comfort zones are tricky. They don't announce themselves. They don't knock on your door and say, "I'm here to keep you average." They slip in quietly, disguised as routines, as habits, as a sense of control. They feel like peace, but they often come at the cost of progress. When you're in a comfort zone, you feel safe, but that safety is a trap. It tells you that things are fine the way they are. It convinces you that there's no need to stretch, to risk, to push any harder. And that's where potential begins to die, not in pain or struggle, but in quiet acceptance. Most people never realize they're in a comfort zone until it's too late. They don't notice the way their dreams have slowly faded into background noise. They don't notice how they've stopped asking questions, stopped setting goals, stopped feeling excited about what could be. Comfort zones are not cages with bars. They are soft chairs, warm rooms, familiar paths, and that's what makes them so dangerous. You don't fight against them because there's nothing to fight. You just settle. You just stay. Every person has untapped potential. There are ideas inside you, strengths inside you, levels of performance you've never accessed, but they live on the other side of discomfort. The comfort zone blocks the door to that growth. It makes you think the way you're doing things is good enough. It tricks you into believing that stability is success. But stability without challenge leads to stagnation. The longer you stay in a comfort zone, the more you lose your hunger, your creativity, your willingness to try. You stop learning. You stop experimenting. You stop exploring new opportunities. You become a master of the familiar instead of a student of possibility. And over time, that shows, not just in your results, but in your energy. Your days start to feel repetitive. Your goals start to shrink. Your belief in what's possible begins to fade. And without realizing it, you start living far below your potential, not because you weren't capable, but because you stopped stretching. Growth requires tension. Just like a muscle needs resistance to grow, your potential needs pressure. It needs challenge. It needs friction. When you avoid discomfort, you also avoid transformation. When you avoid risk, you avoid the chance to evolve. But when you step outside the comfort zone, even just a little, something shifts. You start to think differently. You start to see new angles, new skills, new parts of yourself that were asleep. You wake up not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. People often say they're waiting for the right time to make a change. But what they're really doing is waiting for change to feel comfortable. and it never will. Change doesn't feel safe. Growth doesn't feel easy. That's why most people talk about what they want, but never go after it. They want progress without pain, results without risk. But those two things don't live together. You have to choose. The people who accomplish extraordinary things aren't fearless. They're just willing to move through discomfort. They understand that the cost of staying comfortable is far greater than the cost of stepping into the unknown. They know that regret doesn't come from trying and failing. It comes from wondering what could have happened if they had tried. So they step forward, even with fear, even with doubt, because they'd rather face the storm than stay stuck in silence. Comfort zones also isolate you from pressure, and pressure is where diamonds are formed. It's where character is built. It's where clarity is found. You don't find out who you are when everything is easy. You find out when you're stretched, when things don't go your way, when you have to dig deep. And that version of you, the one who rises when challenged, doesn't show up in comfort. That version waits for you outside the line you've drawn around your life. That's the version that creates, that builds, that wins. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. The real danger of the comfort zone isn't that it makes you feel lazy. It's that it makes you feel fine with being less than what you could be. It makes you justify average. It makes you protect small thinking. It makes you rationalize staying where you are instead of reaching for what's next. Discomfort is not something most people seek. In fact, the natural human instinct is to avoid it. We prefer the smooth path, the easy conversation, the predictable routine. We associate discomfort with danger, with failure, with embarrassment. But discomfort is not the enemy. It's the refiner. It's the experience that shapes raw potential into something strong, focused, and prepared. You don't build character when things are going your way. You build character when nothing seems to be working, but you keep showing up anyway. Character is not formed in moments of ease. It is forged in adversity. When you're tired but choose to keep going. When you feel like giving up but take another step. When you're uncertain but you act with courage anyway. Those are the moments that define who you are. And those moments only come when you're uncomfortable. Discomfort exposes your real values. It shows what you're made of when there's no applause, no reward, no safety net. It strips away the surface and reveals your core. You don't learn patience by getting everything on time. You learn patience when you're delayed, when the answer doesn't come, when the plan doesn't work. You don't develop humility when you're praised. You develop it when you fail publicly and have to face your weaknesses. You don't build confidence by staying in familiar territory. You build it by facing fear, making mistakes, learning the hard way, and realizing you can survive. Every uncomfortable experience leaves a mark. It builds a layer of mental strength. It deepens your understanding. It makes you harder to break. Discomfort also sharpens focus. When everything is easy, you become casual. You take things for granted. But when the pressure rises, so does your clarity. You stop wasting energy. You start paying attention. You ask better questions. You take responsibility. In comfort, it's easy to drift. But discomfort demands intention. It forces you to concentrate, to prioritize, to act with urgency. That intensity teaches you something about discipline. Not the kind you talk about, but the kind you live through action. It's through discomfort that you learn how to manage emotions. Not just in theory, but in real time. You learn to control your temper when things frustrate you. You learn to calm your mind when pressure builds. You learn to breathe through chaos, to stay composed when everything around you feels unstable. Emotional intelligence doesn't grow in silence. It grows in the noise of real challenges, in the fires of conflict, in the unpredictability of life, when your plans fall apart and you have to lead yourself through uncertainty. There's also something deeply revealing about discomfort. It shows you what you really want. When things get hard, casual goals die quickly. If you don't care enough, you quit. But if your vision is strong, discomfort becomes a filter. It burns away excuses. It removes distractions. It forces you to dig deeper into your why. People who accomplish great things are not necessarily more gifted. They're just more committed. They've trained themselves to lean into discomfort because they know that's where growth lies. When you expose yourself to hard things intentionally, you build internal toughness. When you run toward challenge instead of away from it, you learn to trust your capacity. You realize that your limits were mostly mental, that your fears were mostly illusions, that your comfort zone was mostly a ceiling you placed on yourself. And once you break that ceiling, once you feel the power that discomfort gives you, you begin to look at challenge differently. You stop resenting it. You start respecting it because you've seen what it does to your mindset, your discipline, your resilience. Discomfort makes you real. It removes the masks. It puts you in situations where your actions matter more than your intentions, where your consistency matters more than your feelings, where your integrity is tested not when people are watching, but when no one is. And that's where true character is sharpened, not when it's convenient to do the right thing, but when it's costly. Not when it feels good, but when it's hard. Not when you're praised, but when you're challenged and must decide who you want to be when the pressure is on. Failure is uncomfortable. It exposes effort that didn't work. It highlights flaws in your approach, gaps in your preparation, and miscalculations in your thinking. And because of that, most people do everything they can to avoid even thinking about it. They try to move on quickly, to distract themselves, to pretend it didn't happen. They escape failure by blaming someone else, by justifying their choices, or by telling themselves that success just wasn't meant to be. But winners don't do that. Winners slow down. They analyze, they look failure in the eye and ask it what it came to teach. When you escape failure, you miss the lesson. And when you miss the lesson, you're likely to repeat the same mistake. That's the real danger of avoidance. It keeps you stuck in cycles. You might feel better in the moment, but you pay for it in the long run. Real winners understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of the equation. It's not something to run from. It's something to study. They go back and review the conversation that went wrong, the plan that fell apart, the opportunity they didn't capitalize on, not to shame themselves, but to grow. Analyzing failure takes maturity. It takes humility. It takes the willingness to accept that even your best effort can fall short. But instead of letting that destroy their confidence, winners use it to sharpen their judgment. They understand that you cannot improve what you refuse to examine. If you're always in a rush to move on from failure, you carry it with you and into the next attempt. But if you stop and study it, if you extract the insights, you step into your next opportunity wiser and more equipped. It's not just about looking back and saying what went wrong. It's about understanding the thinking behind the decision. What assumptions did you make? What did you overlook? Were you focused or distracted? Did you act out of fear or strategy? When real winners reflect on failure, they're not just reviewing the result. They're dissecting the mindset and behavior that produced it. They treat failure like feedback, not judgment, like information, not identity. That's what separates growth-oriented individuals from those who plateau, the ability to detach emotionally and examine practically. Some people fear failure because they think it defines them. They believe that if they admit something didn't work, it means they're not good enough. Winners see it differently. To them, failure is data. It's neutral. It's just the outcome of a set of actions. If the outcome isn't what they wanted, they adjust. No self-pity, no drama, just evaluation and correction. That's the process of mastery, not getting it perfect every time, but getting better every time. You can't learn if your ego is too loud. Real winners know how to silence the ego long enough to listen to the truth. Sometimes the truth is harsh. You weren't prepared. You didn't try hard enough. You didn't communicate clearly. You rushed. You hesitated. You ignored signs. But that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is the foundation of your next level. When you stop escaping failure and start examining it, you discover patterns in your behavior that hold you back. You see the habits that need breaking, the beliefs that need reshaping, the decisions that need refining. There's power in reflection. There's growth in review. People who succeed consistently are people who analyze consistently. They keep journals. They ask questions. They seek feedback. They don't run from what didn't work. They dig into it. And because of that, they build something rare. Self-awareness. They know where they tend to stumble. They know what triggers poor decisions. They know how to recognize the early signs of drifting. This awareness gives them a strategic edge. They stop repeating avoidable mistakes. They evolve faster. They adapt more quickly. They don't fear failure because they've trained themselves to mine it for value. Failure becomes their teacher, their mirror, their compass. Not because they enjoy it, but because they understand its role. Success is not a straight line drawn through comfort, ease, or perfection. It is carved through failure, molded by discomfort, and refined by the willingness to confront what most people avoid. You grow not when things are easy, but when you're stretched, tested, and humbled. Every failure carries feedback, every setback holds a lesson, and every challenge reveals a deeper layer of who you can become. Comfort may feel good in the moment, but it steals your hunger, your edge, your evolution. If you truly want to rise, you must become the kind of person who learns more from a loss than a win, who treats discomfort not as an enemy, but as a sculptor of strength, and who sees every failure not as the end, but as the next chapter of growth. Success belongs to those who study their falls more than their victories, who stay committed when the path gets hard, and who never settle for the silence of comfort over the voice of purpose.